What's up, everybody? It's Brandon with Box Office Banner and Cult Flick Symposium, and I'm here to talk about The Evil Dead. Yes, the original, the OG that started it all. God, I love these movies. You know what? I got my Gremlins tank top on today. I had my Evil Dead tank on yesterday. I don't plan very accordingly, do I? No, regardless, doesn't change my fandom for this franchise as a whole. This is one of those few where, like, every single movie they've put out within the franchise. Now, granted, it's a smaller sample size to the even bigger franchises, but amongst the collective franchises us horror fans think about, Evil Dead is definitely near the top, even if it's only 4 movies deep. It is beyond a trilogy, at least, people, and we're about to get that fifth, so I figured what better time to revisit than now. The first Evil Dead is a funny one because I think this movie. Now, this will be a kind of a weird segue, but you'll understand once I, make it come all the way back around full circle. I think the original Evil Dead is kind of like forgotten, like the vibes, like in terms of what it is as a horror movie. Yes, there's goofy stuff to go around, but it's a lot like my argument is, and this is what I was talking about right here. My argument for Terminator being a horror movie. I think the original Terminator definitely has horror vibes, but what it became after that, where the sequel, the second one, a lot of people consider it even better than the first. T2, come on. That might be the first one you think of when you think of the franchise, and then it kept pushing onward with more and more action. But if Terminator would have cut everything off, just been a one-off movie, it's almost like a fucking slasher movie with a robot Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I'm sorry, even if you don't agree with me, it's way funner to watch that way. That, I think, happens and bleeds over into this because a lot of people, when they think about Evil Dead, they think about the second one when we get Ash just being slapstick crazy. He almost even looks like Jim Carrey in scenes, just being like, holy hell, like, whatever Jim Carrey moment you want to pick when you got Ash just going insane, cutting his fucking arm off, freaking out, smacking himself around, laughing at different shit. He has this weird slapsticky vibe that doesn't interrupt the adrenaline-inducing craziness that is the Evil Dead franchise that goes forward and goes even more off the rails with Army of Darkness. We'll talk more about that later on. But the original Evil Dead is actually, if you cut it off, there wasn't the almost not even remake, but reimagining type of flick that Evil Dead 2 was. You have a downright sinister and scary movie. Whereas like 2, it's obviously like there's adrenaline. There's, oh my God, this is insane. This is funny, and it's obviously funny, but it's also insane. The first one, it's like humor is happening because it's so batshit crazy, but you feel like you're going crazy with it. Like you're laughing, not at like you're laughing at the expense of what's going on. Whereas in like the sequels, you're laughing, realizing like, hey, this is just, like this is what they're going for. Like it feels more forced in the sequels, whereas the first one, it's just organic and it's so fucking freaky at times. People do not give the original Evil Dead enough credit for how scary it is. I mean, when they're turning into deadites, and the one girl's sitting Indian style laughing, and her eyes are like that, and they're having to throw one bitch down in a hole, and they're having to close it, and it's like, I'm okay now. Like that shit, especially in the 1970s, come the fuck on. Another thing that really helps this movie that the sequels don't have as much going for them is the lower budget. It always is just wonder how they pull it off. But a lot of times, it's been said for many years that when you do have less, sometimes less is more. And a lot of that sometimes goes into filmmaking. Yeah, you don't want to have an absolute shoestring budget. I mean, they did not have much of a budget. Don't get me wrong. Sam Raimi worked wonders here. But you don't want to, like if I pulled out my camera and I just filmed in my backyard right now, you don't want to have something ridiculous like that. But sometimes when you have that shoestring-esque budget and you just got to throw it together and you and your buddies are trying to put together a movie, you're trying to make miracles happen, much like the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That gritty feel, if you do pull it off, sometimes you just cannot match that gritty feeling that those originals give. And this movie, I think it not only helps the movie in general in some weird, crazy way, because it makes it feel more lifelike and surreal, all while being real at the same fucking time somehow, but it also just adds a different elevation to the scariness that is at hand. Evil Dead is really, or The Evil Dead is a really fucking creepy movie when you watch it on its own right and its own merits. The characters here, people forget Ash wasn't even like the front runner necessarily. No, by the end, it's kind of clear that he's going to be the guy to carry the movie because, last man standing, final girl, or the AK, the infamous, maybe of all infamouses, final guy, Ashley. Here he is in all his glory. That's what's crazy. Like, even hearing him get called Ashley, it's just such a weird movie amongst the other movies that I think it's easy to forget what it is for that reason. Like, even hearing Ashley, even seeing downright how Ash acts, it just does not seem like the character that we go on the journey with. Now, you can act like, maybe you start off at 2 even, because 2 is a reimagining, and you're like, the first one, we got this reimagining in Evil Dead 2. It's superior. A lot of people think the second one's superior. I won't reveal if I do or not yet. And why do I need the first one? We have the reimagining. That one feels awkward amongst the rest of the movies because it doesn't fit. Well, for me, it's this awesome, like, beginning, this beginning descent into madness that hasn't quite happened yet with the sequels, that it feels more grounded despite how crazy it is. And I love watching that as a Kickstarter, and it kind of ingratiates me a little bit into this world before I'm there, to where we're going to rev up that chainsaw and go batshit crazy in the sequels. The first one is definitely a nice, breath of fresh air. It's like the lube before you go into getting absolutely fucked by the rest of this franchise. And make no mistake, the fuckery is definitely coming out. The fucking effects that they use, the practical effects, are really good in one. Even the stop motion shit they use, that was a big thing before CGI. I was in a lot of horror movies. Love it or hate it, it does look kind of dumb, but maybe it's because, like, I'm the purest horror fan at heart. Like, I grew up watching this type of shit, and it doesn't age well objectively, but for me as a person, it does. I like watching the crazy stop motion look, like the fucking Dream Warriors stop motion Freddy, where he cuts the string and he comes down before he puts one dude like on the strings while he's sleepwalking in Dream Warriors. All that type of stuff has a special place in my heart growing up with horror movies. So I at least love to see it, like when the monsters like are disintegrating at the end, and then it's almost looks like they have like grits coming out of their, whatever weird food they probably use to shoot out of the sleeves of this monster Deadite to make it, look like it was something it wasn't, like trying to just pass off that this is like goop from the monster, but you're looking at it like, bro, you throw a damn, country fried steak next to that motherfucker, like we got breakfast. Like this movie, like the way they pull everything together with their budget is a masterpiece given those things. I'm not going to give it a masterpiece level because I strictly don't go off of objectivity and necessarily like taking what's going on and like into consideration. That does fall somewhere into my review, but it's not all of it. I am purely subjective in my reviews, but that also doesn't take away from this film. This film revved it up again last night, and it holds the same weight it does as it did when I was a little kid. It still affects me in the same ways. I still laugh at times, even though it isn't pure crazy like ha 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 laughter that is like the comedy horror gold for like fucked up people in the head that is 2, 3, and 4. It still does bring the little quick one-off laughs, and it brings the just sheer terror that like you're not expecting in the early going. The way that fucking the woods just come to life in this movie and won't let you leave. The tracking shots, just the shots in general they use with like the POV, and then like sometimes I'll have it overhead, and just watching these characters slowly just descend into madness, and it's revved up. This movie is just relentless in its ability to just keep coming at you, keep coming at you. Just when you think, okay, we can take a breather, we're going to keep coming at you, keep coming at you. It's so good in that regard, and it's so good in any regard. The original Evil Dead is a 9 out of 10 to me. It is a great fucking horror movie, and it deserves to be hailed as such, and I can't wait to jump into the rest of them because Sam Raimi just pulled a rabbit out of a hat. This is probably something he could never do over again, and that's not to take a shit on, Raimi. There's a reason why he was able to pull it off, because any average person could never do this. But with the budget he had and the crew he had, they just worked magic. And sometimes that's all you need. You just need that one break, and then you can show off just how great you are. And next thing you know, you're doing the Spider-Man movies. Like, it's crazy. You just need to get your foot in the door, and he did with this movie. And did he ever? The Evil Dead is a classic that is definitely going to keep fucking imprinting itself on horror fans from now into deep into the future. I mean, how old is this movie now, man? I mean, we're talking, was that 45 years old? I mean, this movie's almost 50 years old, still has the same impact to me, especially if you take into consideration the timing of when this came out, the time of when this came out, and what they were given to make such an impactful horror movie. The Evil Dead is a fucking blast. Definitely watch it if you've never seen it. Such a fun movie and a tour de force in doing this type of scare factor with the shoestring budget. Check out The Evil Dead, and if you've seen it, which you probably have if you're here on this channel and you've listened to all this, watch it again. I'll be back talking about The Evil Dead 2 soon, guys, and I'll be seeing Evil Dead Rise. I'm really, really hoping that one just knocks it out of the park. It looks amazing. I know we're all hyped for that. So, everybody, buckle up. We're so close. It's almost fucking Friday, man. I can't wait for it. Love you guys. Peace.